Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast, the podcast dedicated to simplifying the commercial real estate industry for the masses. Each week, we sit down with industry experts to dissect the many facets of commercial real estate and extract valuable lessons you can apply to your business. Whether you're a new or seasoned business owner or investor, the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast will be your go-to resource for all your commercial real estate needs. Now, here are your hosts, Raphael Collazo and Jeff Walston.
Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast. I'm your host, Raphael Collazo, here with my co-host, Jeff Walston. How's it going, my friend?
Going great, man. Can't complain. Even if I did, no one would, acknowledge it. They would probably just laugh at it, think it's funny, but no worries. But no, business is good. Can't wait to finish all these projects that I have in the pipeline right now. They're going to be all ending like pretty much at the exact same time or within the same week. It's going to be crazy. And then personal life couldn't be better. Definitely not going to complain about that because it's definitely a happy life for me over here. So, how about you, Raphael? How's it going over there?
That's glad. I'm good to hear that. I'm good to hear, man. Like obviously, it's personal life is very important, and I'm glad to hear that everything's going well on that front. And also, if you decide to complain, I'd be here to listen to it. So, you're the one. I'm always an open ear, as they say. But no, on my end, everything's going really well. I cannot complain about life. It's going really well both on the personal front and the business front, and I'm just looking forward to finishing out the year strong and building upon the success into 2023.
Being a married man,
and yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what we're really looking forward to. I know, and you'll be there to celebrate with us in Puerto Rico, and it's gonna be a great time. So I'm really excited to celebrate with you all. But speaking of just a phenomenal conversation and just a great individual, and someone who I somewhat aspire to be, because he's in the retail sector, and that's kind of where I've been focusing myself as well, as Don Gregor, the executive vice president for Aurora Realty Consultants. He's actually located in Canada, and we had a very, very interesting conversation on the retail sector of real estate. And so one of the things we talked about is how he got started in the business in the first place. He did have an interesting story about how he was able to get into the commercial real estate business. And also, we talked on, some of the struggles he faced early on in his career. As we know, the brokerage space can be quite difficult to get established in. And so he kind of shared some of his insights pertaining to some of the things he had to overcome early on in his career. Along with that, we touched on reasons why he decided to focus on retail real estate early on in his career. He did a lot on the retail and restaurant side. At one point, he was saying he did almost 70 deals a year in the retail space. And then as his career has progressed, he's gotten more focused, and he only does like 7 or 8 deals, but it's all in grocery stores. So, he only does like 7 or 8 big deals for these large grocery store chains all over this in the sections of Canada that he specializes in. And, he kind of gives reasons as to why that's the case. Along with that, we touched on a variety of different things pertaining to what things he helps his clients consider as they're going through the process of determining whether or not a site is appropriate for their particular use. Obviously, he wasn't initially a very big believer in demographics and a lot of these other, data points that you would input to determine these types of things. But he's become a very strong believer, and he even shares some of the tools that he uses to kind of come to that determinations as he's helping his clients determine whether or not it's actually worthwhile to pursue a particular opportunity. And then finally, we touched on the social media piece. He's on the list of CREI influencers, and we kind of touched on how social media has impacted his life and career. Something that he's kind of adopted over the last several years, and some of the lessons he's learned from those experiences. So I thought it was a very phenomenal conversation. Like I said, I'm personally in the retail. I'm focusing on the retail side, so it was very insightful on my end. I'm sure you guys will gain a lot of value as well. So Jeff, what do you think?
Yeah, from what you said, I pretty much covered the episode. I unfortunately missed it, so I wish I could have listened in. Don seemed like he's definitely leading the way up there in Canada, and I can't wait to re-listen to the podcast. But other than that, I've been saying this for quite a few episodes now. The show is free to listen to, but there is a price. and that is a recommendation for a fellow colleague or client or even a friend, anyone that you think could benefit from listening or has interest in the commercial real estate sector. We would greatly appreciate that. And then if you have a recommendation of someone that you think would give a lot of value to our listeners or the show, if you want to recommend that to us as well, reach out to Raphael or myself. That'd be great. And we just appreciate everyone's support thus far. I know you guys have been doing a lot, giving back to doing reviews and recommend the show. So if you could just keep that up, we highly appreciate it.
Absolutely. I mean, really, I mean, the biggest gift you could possibly give us is just sharing the podcast with someone. I mean, that's kind of our mission, is to demystify the commercial real estate industry for the masses.
Yep.
So the more people we can reach, the more we can actually inform and educate people about the industry. And hopefully that leads to people wanting to come in the industry, because it is a phenomenal industry. And we're hopeful that more and more people realize that, so they can, take advantage of all the opportunities it has to offer. So we would greatly appreciate if you guys could do that. Along with that, if you guys haven't had a chance to, we would greatly appreciate if you could leave a 5-star review. It does make an impact on people's decision about whether or not to start listening to the podcast. So, the more positive reviews we have, the more impact we can have long term. And so if you don't mind, don't do this while you're driving if you are driving, but please go ahead and just go into Apple Podcasts or Spotify when you get a chance and just leave us a 5-star review. It really would mean the world to us, and it really does make a big impact on our reach over a longer period of time. So again, thank you all so much for the support you guys have shown us. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into the podcast episode. Well, hey, Don, great to see you this fine afternoon.
Pleasure. Nice to see you. It's Friday before a long weekend, so it's a nice quiet afternoon. I think most leasing people have taken the afternoon off and headed up to Muskoka. So pleasure to see you, Raphael.
Oh, absolutely. And you're tuning in from Canada, correct? Is that correct?
I'm in Horseshoe Valley, which is about an hour and a half north of Toronto. I live in a golf and ski resort and pickleball, and I'm halfway between the Muskokas and downtown Toronto. So it's a beautiful place to live.
Oh,
but this is our long August holiday weekend. August 1st is a bank holiday in Canada. And so most people kind of called it quits around noon hour. So we're talking at 2:00. There's not much else going on except you and me. So
well, that's good. I'm glad I get the voted time to be able to talk to you about your background and your story and everything. And Canada, beautiful place. I've had a chance to go to Montreal before, and I've been on, fringe border towns occasionally here and there on the East Coast. But, one of the places I've never been to is Toronto. I'd love to go one day. It's definitely a beautiful country though. So
I'd love to have you up here. Once we have our problems fixed at the Toronto airport, you should come for a visit. But don't come right now.
No, I understand. I actually have a lot of family. So I'm half Italian, half Puerto Rican. So half my family's in Italy, and I haven't been back to Europe in a couple of years now. Number one, because of COVID, but number two, now that things are kind of lifting as far as restrictions, it's just kind of a pain a lot traveling around, and everything else is just kind of a pain. So we're probably going to wait until 2023 to make it over there. But yeah, I'm a big traveler, so I love to partake in that.
I am as well. I spend a lot of time in London, England. I've got a daughter in med school over there right now. She's in her final year number 7. So my wife and I spend a couple of months a year in London. Hence, I've got a real thing for UK retail as a result. And but yeah, the traveling is slowly coming back. Unfortunately, our local airport, Pearson International, is voted the worst airport in the world right now for delays and cancellations. So I don't recommend you come to Canada this month, but maybe in the fall. So
definitely. No, well, again, thank you so much for your time. As you said before, this is going into a long weekend. So we definitely appreciate the time that you've taken with us to be able to share your insights. So one of the things that I'm curious about is what we typically do when we first interview someone is we like to learn a little bit more about their backstory. So if you don't mind kind of sharing your insights on that front, I think that'd be great.
Sure. I've been in commercial real estate for 35 years. I started with Royal LePage Commercial in industrial sales. I was head of research for a couple of years. And I have a Bachelor of Science degree in geology. I graduated from McMaster in 1985. And I graduated at a time when the government said they needed lots of geologists. And then At the same time, they went and nationalized our oil industry and forced us all out of work. So I kind of sat around and didn't know what to do. And my girlfriend, now my wife, her brother went to Western, and he did urban geography and got hired by Royal LePage into office leasing. And luckily, on a phone call, I got a call one night saying, "Hey, you interested in going into real estate?" And I wasn't really gainfully employed at that point. I was doing a lot of other things that weren't part of my future. And I said, "Sure, I'd be very interested in doing that." And so on a phone call, I had an interview, and I met with the head of industrial in Toronto for Royal LePage. And he showed me an IBM System 38 and said, "Do you know how to run this thing?" And I went, "Yeah, it runs on DOS." And he goes, "You're hired." So I spent 2 years in research, and I spent 10 years doing industrial sales. And then I went into the management group at Royal LePage Commercial. And I went into retail for a number of years. And surprisingly, I was pulled out of sales when the company was designing a new sales computer system. They looked at me as being a young guy that was computer savvy. And at that time, real estate was very much an old boys club, and I was one of the younger guys. And they pulled me out, and they said, "Hey, we need a new computer system. Don't tell anybody what you're doing. We'll give you $500,000 and hire whoever you want." And I said, "Okay." So I went and I hired the youngest, brightest guys out of Ryerson and Waterloo and and University of Toronto. And in about 6 months, we got in touch with Microsoft. And that was right around the time when PCs were becoming desktop and Microsoft Access was becoming busy. So in 6 months, we designed a complete sales system based on Microsoft Access and SQL Server, and we got it all rolled out across the country nationally. And it was a really great project. And they asked me, "Do you want to stay and head up research and start this new thing called the internet?" And I went, "Well, you know what? I think you should hire this guy, who is my youngest youngest tech. He was brilliant, and he went on to become head of research and technology at Royal LePage." And I went back into sales, and that's what I really wanted to do. I'm kind of very much a people person. I really enjoyed it. And then I left sales and I went over to the landlord side for a couple of years. I worked with Butyl Goodman, which was later bought out by Bentall and Green Oak. And then I went to Smart Centers for 6 months. And then I was hooked up with the guys I'm with right now, which is Aurora Realty Consultants out of Montreal. The president of the company, Jeff Berkowitz, and I sat down, had a coffee. Half an hour later, we shook hands, and we've been together for 20 years. So, getting into retail was a lot of fun for me. I had done 10 years of industrial and gone through multiple recessions, and it was brutal. I remember one call to an industrial owner, and they're all typically engineers or process-oriented type of guys, and they said, "You're the 10th real estate agent to call me today. Why don't you call me tomorrow when I have to hand the building back to the bank?" And I went, "Wow." So I said, "Okay." But what I found going into retail was the people that you're working with are very entrepreneurial, and they're a lot of fun. And they'll move across the street if they think it's a better deal. But when you're working in industrial, it's a huge, complex issue to move an industrial facility. You've got a lot of engineering, pre-engineering, racking systems, manufacturing, reinforced floors, heavy power, and you're working a prospect list of hundreds of industrial users, moving 10 or 20 of them a year. Very, very difficult business. Working in tenant rep in retail, I kind of changed the tables. I work with 20 retailers. Some of those guys do 20 deals a year. And it's much more repetitive business. You get more of a rapport and watching their business evolve. Like some of my clients I've worked with for 15 years, you've seen them go from 10 locations to 50, and you're part of that evolvement. That's very hard to do in industrial, because you do one deal, you move on. You do one deal, you move on. But I liked that I liked the retail end of the business for the aspect of being able to become heavily involved as a real estate consultant, and being part of the decision making, and helping them choose sites, good or bad, that reflect how the company can grow. And that's been a lot of fun. So I love retail. I've been doing it for probably 26, 27 years, and that's pretty much my background. But if you ask me to state what I think is a really interesting thing about my career is, I made my career on a phone call. Somebody called me and said, "Hey, you want to try this?" And I said, "Okay." And I've actually gone back to my university, my alma mater at McMaster, and the dean of sciences called me up one day and said, like, "How the hell did you get into commercial real estate from geology?" And I went and spoke to a couple of undergrad classes, and I told him, I said, "Listen," I said, "you go to university, you meet some great people, you learn some really interesting things, and you become the kind of person that you're going to become. But it's not the end all. And if you come to university to get a job, you've come here for all the wrong reasons. If you come here to learn how to be flexible and change hats and pivot on a dime and make life really important life decisions very, very quickly, and have lifelong friends, you come here for the right reasons." And I've spoken to McMaster a couple of times on that, and like I've seen kids look at me going, "Are you crazy?" And I go, "No, life throws you a lot of curveballs, and you got to be ready to catch it, and just go with it." And I remember speaking to an undergrad class once, and I said, if you come home from your classes during the day and the first thing you work on is your elective, you're in the wrong faculty. you should change faculties immediately and work on what you love. Because if you're just doing a paper chase and you're just chasing it to get the degree, you're losing out on all the things in life that university and other aspects give you. So, but I've had a very fun career, so.
That's awesome. Yeah. And it's very indicative to a lot of the people that we've interviewed on the podcast, is that it's not the commercial real estate industry. You get into it in one of two ways. Either A, your family had been into it for a long period of time, or B, for a lot of people, it's just, they kind of fall into it. I mean, I'm an engineer by trade. I studied industrial engineering and economics in college, and then got into the software space. And I was a developer for 5 years, traveling around the country, abroad, doing different large software projects for government agencies. And, I happened to fall into commercial real estate here in the Louisville area a couple of years ago, and I've been doing it for 3 years now. And interestingly enough, I'm in a boutique brokerage, so we do a good amount of different deals, but I've started specializing a lot more on the retail side. I've been working a lot with restaurant owners and franchisees and other things like that. And I've really kind of gravitated towards that for that exact reason that you had mentioned. It's such a diverse, I just love the fact you get to learn about so many different types of businesses, because, what works well for a quick service restaurant may not work what's best for a bike shop, may not work what's best for, other types of retailers, maybe they're grocery stores or, whatever else. Right. So I've really enjoyed my time in the business, and thank you for the insights pertaining to your background. I think, again, a lot of the people that listen to this podcast come from a variety of different backgrounds. And so it's always kind of nice to hear the insights from someone who, has been in the business for a while, but also came from a different path that they ultimately didn't know they were going to go down. So yeah. So one of the things I was curious about is, obviously you made that transition from industrial to retail. How was that for you? Because you've been doing it for about 10 years. So, you'd think, I mean, that's why a lot of commercial agents specialize, is because, you get very narrow focused in one direction. So when you made that shift, was it a difficult transition for you? And if so, I guess, what are some of the things that you had to navigate to be able to make sure that you could execute effectively?
Well, at the time, that's very interesting. Industrial and office leasing were the big boys in the Toronto market at that time, and retail was very, very small. There was maybe a couple of small boutique industry companies. Oberfeld Snowcap was huge. They still are, but the major brokerages, being people like Royal LePage, CB, Colliers, they weren't involved that heavily in retail at that time. And then I hooked up with half a dozen other agents, most of us young, that said, you know what, let's give this retail a play. And that was just the start of the big boxes. Companies like Smart Centers, which is Mitch Goldhar's company, was building all the Walmarts across Canada. He built about 240 of them. And I got into the business shortly after that. In fact, I was chasing Walmart as an industrial client when Mitch Goldhar was chasing Walmart as a retailer. So Mitch and I are actually the same age. So when I transitioned into retail, it was just on the cusp of when retail was really starting to grow in the Toronto area and across Canada. We had all these power centers sprouting up, and there was literally millions of square feet of leasing that needed to be done. And then at the same time, Colliers and CB also loaded up with retail specialty departments. And so I was just lucky to be one of the first guys at Royal LePage, which is now Cushman and Wakefield, to get involved in it. So there's like a team of 6 to 8 of us. We branded ourselves as the retail group, and ICSC was just starting to have a presence in Canada, so we all joined. And the first deals I did were small, paint stores, restaurants, and things like that, and pet food companies, but not the big chains. Like, it took a while for us to kind of realize that there were big chains, and none of all the retail deals, the mall type deals, were effectively being done by 1 or 2 companies. Like, nobody was doing that, or they're being done by consultants outside the normal realm of brokerages. So it was just the time to join. I kind of, again, it was this right place at the right time.
That's awesome. And I mean, now, as you started, was it a period of time where Toronto was experiencing rapid growth, or I guess how has the Toronto landscape shifted over that period of time?
Well, when I started in industrial 35 years ago, Toronto was going through an explosion of industrial development. Literally hundreds of millions of square feet of industrial being built, at that time. And again, right now we're going through another huge boom of industrial, but it's now like mega distribution facilities like the Amazons of the world, and large third-party distribution. So industrial is just on fire again. It's like the second big cycle. So when I got into industrial, it was just going crazy. And then when I went into retail, luckily it was again a booming time in the industry for industrial. For retail. There was just so many power centers being built. Literally tens of millions of square feet of GLA being built every year, and it was, it was again the right place at the right time.
Definitely. No, I couldn't agree more. And again, the real estate landscape shifts over time. So I'm interested to see how it all plays out over the next 10 years or so, in a variety of different markets across the country. One thing I was kind of curious about is you mentioned that, early on in your career, you're doing those smaller deals, and now you're starting to get in with these real estate groups. I was kind of wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on, how those relationships were built for you. And then from there, are you now primarily focused on the tenant rep side, or are you also representing landlords? And then how does that dynamic work?
Well, when I first got into the business in retail, I was working with a conventional brokerage that did a lot of listings work. And I, like a lot of realtors, have kind of listing ADD. Okay. I love the listing, and it's a sparkly thing. I want it. And then as soon as I have it, I hate it. Like, I feel it's got an anchor around my leg. And I find listings very difficult to service. I'm not a listings oriented type of guy. I am now exclusively tenant rep. So I like the flexibility of being able to work with clients that I want to work with in sectors that I'm interested in, and then travel. I do business in Ontario and British Columbia, so I can then focus on clients and putting them into projects that I have an interest in. But I know guys who are great listing agents, and especially I know one woman in particular who every 2 weeks she'd call me up she'd get my first call in the morning saying, I've got this, and this. And she'd just like peg all of her listings, and she'd be great at marketing on behalf of landlords. And about 2 years ago, one of my grocery store clients was doing a redevelopment of their shopping center. And as a result, they brought in about 30,000 square feet of CRU, and they asked me to list it. And I said, no, but I know just the woman to do it. And I gave it to this woman named Megan, and the landlord loved her. But she was great at doing that kind of work. And she had no hesitation working with sign calls or small startup franchisees or whoever wanted her space, and she'd fill it. And that just isn't my bag. I sit down. I like more of the tenant relationship with larger companies. You mentioned something just right now, Raphael, that I wanted to pivot off of. When I first started in the business, I used to do 50 to 70 deals a year in retail. I do 7, 8 now, but they're all much, much larger. And my transaction time from start to finish can be 2 years. Like I do a lot of grocery stores. I do a lot of furniture stores. And I also represent Exponential Fitness in Canada, which is kind of a smaller thing. I kind of spearhead that for our sales reps. But some of my bigger deals, like I just did a grocery deal with Sobeys, which is one of our big national chains. It took me 6 years. And that particular development, I was actually the listing agent. That was one of the few times in the last 10 years I took a listing. It was with an Israeli developer that had bought a large residential project right next to one of our expressways, and they were doing infill around the res, so they were building dozens of condos. So they had a grocery store. They had an older grocery store on the site they wanted to demolish to build a condo on it. And they're going to put another 30,000 square footer, so they gave me the listing. Well, over the course of marketing that for 18 months to all the major nationals, that site evolved at least a half a dozen times. Like initially it was a pavilion with buildings on either side, and then it ended up being having 2 buildings on top of it. And if you're familiar with grocery stores, as soon as you build on top of it and you have to put down elevator shafts and specialized electrical to service the res above, you're breaking up the store. And our deal fell apart and came back together. And then it was an architectural and legal nightmare, but eventually it got done. But I like the idea of working on bigger stuff now. I'm 60 years old now. I'm probably another 10 years in this business, and old brokers don't retire. They just keep doing bigger and bigger deals until they just don't do them anymore. That's kind of what I'm doing. I'm riding a bigger horse out of the rodeo every day.
That's awesome. No, I mean, and that's what a lot of people aspire to as well. I mean, that's kind of what I've heard from a lot of people that are, further on in their career, is that they start off doing a ton of deals, a lot of the smaller deals and a lot of the deals with startups and other things like that. And, off the call, we had kind of talked about some of the things that I've been, facing on my end with some, startup clients as well. So, everyone goes through those experiences, and, obviously there's benefit to doing that because you get a lot of reps and you get an understanding of the dynamics within the market. And over time, as you start evolving those relationships with larger players, then obviously you can leverage those relationships to do more if that's what you want to do. I mean, there's literally anything you want to do within the business, you can, if you decide that that's something you really want to pursue.
Well, you were saying you were working on restaurant deals off the call. I used to do a lot of restaurant deals. I probably did 15 or 16 Moxie's deals. I used to do Tony Roma's. This is about 15, 20 years ago. I used to do like 10 or 15 of them a year. They're very, very difficult because, you as you were saying, you get into a situation where a restaurant's been underutilized or unused for 6 months, and all of a sudden you're having to scrap all the equipment. The electrical's a nightmare. There's liens. Every deal becomes very, very difficult. So I managed to pivot my restaurant business into bigger stuff. I started doing hotels. I started doing hotel deals. So I did, about a dozen major hotel deals as a pivot off my restaurant business. So I don't do any restaurant business anymore. I love the restaurant business, and I think it's very, very interesting. People like all the wings companies that are coming up here now. There's Toronto's a very cosmopolitan city. There are, literally 140 different nationalities in Toronto, and there are hundreds and hundreds of restaurants. Our company did some of the work for I'm trying to remember the major Chinese restaurant chain out of the U.S.
Panda Express? No, I don't know.
No, not Panda Express. Yeah. But the name escapes me right now. But we had a mandate with these guys for a while, and we flew down to Scottsdale to see their head office and some of their facilities. And I was with my partners, and I said, guys, like, I can get better Chinese food, at over a dozen restaurants in the downtown core than this. Like, I don't understand why these guys are coming here. And they came to Toronto with much fanfare, and then they're gone in 3 years because people realized it was a very nice restaurant. It was P.F. Chang's. Thank you very much. Yeah. My lovely assistant just flashed for P.F. Chang's. Mm-hmm. But P.F. Chang's was building 10,000 square foot restaurants and putting millions of dollars into leaseholds, and it was they're competing against every other restaurant that had family ties or whatever. And like you read the retail news in Toronto, there's Arabic restaurants, there's restaurants from Jordan, from South Africa. Like it's just unbelievable. So it's such a crowded market that I decided just to get out of it, because how do you differentiate as a landlord between, okay, I want to do a tandoori restaurant, or I want to do Chinese, or I want to do Filipino? And like Jollibee just came here from the Philippines, and they are just killing it. But they're like the McDonald's of the Philippines. And one of the really interesting things was these guys did their homework. There's a huge diaspora of Filipinos in Canada, and a lot of them come over as they work in the hospitality industry, or they work as domestics. And these guys realized that the highest concentration of Filipinos per capita was in Winnipeg, not in Toronto. They opened their first store in Winnipeg. They were lined up for blocks. And, that's just, really, really smart guys that knew what they were doing. I know the guy that handles their account, and, they're smart. You have to be tunnel vision, surgical in your whole approach to doing restaurant deals, because they're difficult. Like I used to say as a joke to a lot of my landlords and tenant friends is that, I'll show you a restaurant, and then I'll drive you 100 miles outside of town, and I'll beat you senseless with a baseball bat. And if you crawl back to my office the next day and you want to sign the lease, okay. But I'm trying to do you a favor, okay? Because restaurants they're so hard to run. You've got staffing issues, financing issues, logistics. You better love what you're cooking, because you might be eating it at the end of the night. So, it's tough business.
Absolutely. Yeah. And outside of commercial real estate and development, like software development, I throughout high school and even college, I was in the rrestaurant business as a server, busser. I managed a restaurant a little bit after college, and you're 100% right. We were watching our like labor costs like a hawk. You have to, to get people off. And again, it depends on the model. Ours was like a healthy wrap place, and we'd have, two employees on staff in the back of the house. They were doing their own thing as well, but we would have to release people based on our metrics, because we'd have to stay under 30% as far as our operation costs for wages. And so anytime we were getting close to that number, based on all the money that we had in the drawers, et cetera, throughout our lunch rush, we'd have to let people go to make sure we were hitting those metrics. Because if not, then obviously, your margins are just too slim. And, that's what happens with restaurants. They go out pretty regularly. I mean, it's not uncommon to see restaurants in 1 year, and then the next year, they're not there. So one of the problems the Canadian market and the Toronto market in particular had regarding restaurants was immigration based. We had a period of time where people wanting to come to Canada, if they could invest $250,000 or $300,000 in a business in Canada, they fast tracked the immigration line. So we had a long period of time where
it was mostly new immigrants that had, family money or money that they'd saved up and wanting to come to Canada, that were opening up all the new restaurants. And that was, disheartening as a rep, when you realize that this was their people's life savings they're putting on the line. And sometimes they're just getting muscled into failing situations. And it was too bad to see. These are nice people working hard, bought the wrong franchise. It wasn't going to work for them. And, 6 months later, they're out of business, or whatever the situation was. And, they were sold a franchise by a franchise developer that is a plaza that's not going to be built for a year. And, they've spent $50,000, and this plaza is going to sit around for a year. This guy needs to feed his family today. He needs a deal today, but it wasn't going to happen.
No, for sure. No, and a little bit unique in the Toronto market, but I'm sure that has occurred across the country. I know here in the US, we've been a little bit more strict on that as well. But I know back in the day, there was something similar where it was like, if you invested a certain amount of money within, the economy, then, there was a little bit of a fast track depending on the region of the world that you came in from, as well. So we had something similar as well. But one of the things I was curious about is on the leasing side. So when you're working with your clients to start off with, what are some of the things, and again, you're working with a large corporate client, so I mean, maybe their considerations are a little bit different, but what are some of the considerations that are made prior to actually leasing the space that, you typically work through with your clients?
Well, I do a lot of grocery stores and furniture stores. So we're heavily into demographics. I never used to be a huge user of demographics, like the Buxtons of the world and people like that. But now I am. I'm completely sold on it. We have a specialist in our company that works with Pinpoint and Veronix, and the stuff that you can do now with competing profiles. Most of my clients now, and I do work with grocery stores. I do an organic grocery store. We can create a client profile using demographics. So we can say we want a woman that has 2.3 kids. She's university educated. She drives a Volvo. She spends so much. Spends $1,500 a year on dog food, or any has healthcare plans. And you can create this profile that most retailers didn't know anything about this kind of stuff, but now they do. And I'm doing more and more of this kind of profiling. I just picked up a client out of Europe that is in the hearing aid business, and I didn't know anything about hearing aids until I met these guys. But hearing aids are extremely expensive. Like they cost between $5,000 and $10,000. So you've got a store that's 2,000, maybe 2,500 square feet selling hearing aids. It's probably doing more money per square foot than an Apple store. Like, it's just insane. So we were looking at the entire provincial market in Ontario, and we were wanting to find areas of the country where there were pockets of the population over 65 or over 70, right? And we can now develop heat maps where we can zoom right in, and we can see a municipality that, on a percentile basis compared to everything else in the province, suddenly has a huge amount of retirees. And then we can drill in there and we can say, well, of those retirees, what's their income? How much money do they spend on health insurance? That was the key, because they're using health insurance to buy these hearing aids. So like when we started showing the client the kind of stuff that we can do, they just went, oh my God. And what was their top 20 list became their top 10 very, very quickly, because we knew exactly what municipalities we wanted to go to, what neighborhoods we wanted to go to. And, when you're actually boots on the ground and start looking around at what you saw on the computer, it's accurate. It kind of, the other interesting thing is what you can do with demographics using cell phones. One of my grocery store deals, we created what they call a fence, a digital fence around the property. And we also put digital fences around all of our competitors' properties as well. And we were able to track the movement of cell phones in and out of those properties. So say, for example, I'm representing Sobeys. we can look at the law. We can look at the Loblaws down the street, put a digital fence around their property, and we know where all those customers are coming from because we know where their phone sleeps at night. So the stuff that you can do is really amazing. As far as the leasing considerations, I work with a lot of people who are CFOs, MBAs. The typical tools that I use when I'm selling a deal is like an NER tool. I use a lease amortization tool. I use present values and things like that. I can take a 20-year lease and I can show on an appreciating cap basis how much it's going to cost people, and I can load in all their I can show how much the landlord is spending on TAs and things like that. And then right now we're going through a kind of a heavy inflationary period. So people are worried about, well, what's my CAM and what's my operating going to be 4 years from now? Well, I can vary that CAM and operating as well on different levels. Like, so for the next 4 years, I can escalate it at 7%. And then for the rest of the lease, I can escalate it at 3%, which is more conventional. So, by helping people, look at things that are apples and oranges in an apples type of look and put it all on the same page. That's like, I sell most of my deals on a financial basis. That's what's really interesting. Now my partner's my wife, and she looks at things completely differently. She'll talk to the retailer and she said, I don't like the look of the parking lot. I can't see your store from the street. And, my wife has a whole different way of looking at things. And that's why I love working with her, because she'll say, I can't see that. It's too far away from the Dollar Tree here. And I go, okay. I said, well, I want the grocery store closer to the Dollar Tree because I'm going to go to both of them. And that's just the way she thinks. And I'm a retailer. I'm a retail leasing rep, but I don't live and breathe retail like a lot of other people do. Like, my wife loves to shop, and she'll be the first one to say you're out of your tree. Like, you shouldn't go here. And sometimes when we're in meetings, she'll tell the retailer just exactly that. I don't like the site because. So you can go overboard on the financials and the demographics, and sometimes it's just the gut. And like, my wife, when she's in a business meeting with me, she just speaks from the gut and says this site sucks because, and sometimes that's what they need to hear.
Oh yeah, no, and I mean, it's amazing, the technology and the analytics that are available for making those types of decisions nowadays. I know I've been taking CCIM courses, and they utilize Site to Do Business, and I played around a lot with that technology, and it's pretty impressive. I didn't know there was such a thing as digital fences. That's really cool. I have to look into, that technology. Yeah. But you're right. And I feel like, was it Why We Buy, the book? I mean, it's a lot of it is psychology of how, we just operate in a space. And so some of the things that you look for in retail are somewhat intuitive versus, maybe not more non-intuitive, I guess, than actually looking at the data and everything else. And that's kind of what you're alluding to with your wife's making that determination. That's literally just her feeling about the space. And that's how a lot of people operate, right? It's not, I'm not going to this particular, area because of X, Y, Z, whatever statistics. It's like, this is how I feel based on what, I'm seeing in the real world. So that makes sense.
She'll say things. I hate the drive. I hate the neighborhood. The parking spaces are too small. I don't like where I have to drop my cart off. And then when she's in a store, she talks about the visualization. And one of the companies I did a lot of business with was a company called Farm Boy. Now, Farm Boy was they're based out of Ottawa. They're a very small little company that was picked up by a venture capital group out of Boston and expanded very rapidly into the GTA. But the guy behind it was more or less modeling this after Trader Joe's. Like 90% of their product offering is their own brands. And I remember walking around with this gentleman. His name's Jeff York. And we were in a Loblaws, and he was in front of the cashiers and looking at the store. And right in front of the cash was a Pepsi display. And then there was another display selling toilet paper. And he said, that's a stupid waste of space. He said, in my stores, that would be the highest selling thing or something I'm bringing new to the market to promote and I'd have someone there demonstrating it. Like in Costco, we go into Costco, you have people demonstrating new products. We go into a Farm Boy, you have people demonstrating their latest, newest thing. He doesn't even sell toilet paper. He doesn't even sell pop, because he says, if you want that, go to Walmart. If you want something special, come to my store. And my wife loves shopping there, because it's an experience. Like, it's, retail has a lot to do with the feel. It's an aesthetic gut feeling. Like, how do you feel in the store? Do you want to go back there? Because you can shop anywhere. And, I never really got that when I first started in the business, but my wife did. Like, my wife knows there's certain stores she loves to shop at because they look great and they make you feel good and you like shopping there. And it's kind of a love reward type of scenario. You gotta love what you do. And, the reward is you get to go and shop and reward yourself. And a retailer who grooms that with a buyer is they've made the right decisions. They're running the right kind of store, because people can shop anywhere.
Absolutely. And understanding your clientele is so important. That's when you alluded to, obviously the hearing aids, you're not going to appeal to a certain group of people, and you shouldn't as a retailer. There's certain people, there's a certain profile of individual who's going to be your go-to person. And that's in any industry, in any business. And so clearly understanding what your target wants and likes is obviously something that's important in any arena. So one of the things I wanted to touch on before we round out the podcast was related to the social media aspect. Obviously, this is something that is becoming a lot more prevalent in today's society. And, I've been in the business for a couple of years now, and I've tried to lean in heavily into the digital side of things. I definitely see that being the way that, the future as far as marketing and even just consumption of information. I'm a religious audiobook listener. I listen to podcasts and I consume information in that fashion. And I know a lot of people in my age group tend to do that as well. And so, my thought process is that over time, things will evolve to a point where people start, consuming information primarily from these mediums. But one of the things that I was kind of curious about is, obviously you've been involved in the LinkedIn side of things and other social aspects. How have you noticed any changes in the way that you approach your day-to-day as a result of that, of those social media accounts? And then from there, have you seen an impact in a positive way in anything that you're doing on a day-to-day?
Well, I changed my way of doing business about 5 years ago. Because my background was in information technology and research, I love to read things. I don't read graphic novels, and I don't read historical stuff, I read news. So what I started doing about 5-6 years ago was every morning for about 2 hours, I read dozens of news outlet sources from all around the world. So I read things like Business of Fashion. I read Women's Wear Daily. I read Retail Dive. I read Retail Insider. I read MSNBC. I read stuff from Australia, Europe, Germany. I read automation and technologies, logistics. So I have a daily practice where I go through all this stuff, and I typically for my sales reps, and we've got about 20 sales reps in our company, I produce a list of hot news of the 10 or 12 things that I find interesting, and I circulate to my sales team. So about 4 or 5 years ago, I also got interested in LinkedIn. And I thought, well, I'm already giving all this stuff to my sales staff. Why don't I start posting this on LinkedIn? Well, surprisingly enough, some of the stuff I posted on LinkedIn got a lot of hits. And, I was, posting stuff. I'd see something immediately, post it within 5-10 minutes. And the next day I've had 600 views. So I found that very interesting. So I'm up to a few thousand followers now. I have just a conventional LinkedIn account. I like the idea of being able to formally connect with people. I don't have it set up that I'm just a creative end of things and just have followers. And I have made friends with LinkedIn all around the world. Guys who are presidents of companies in New York, Miami, Denver, London, England. When my wife and I were last over in London, I met up with a guy named Ian Scott, who is a prolific UK LinkedIn guy. And we got together, had lunch at Battersea, and then we went up to a big retail convention in London, which was all about emerging technologies on the POS side. And this guy walked into the arena, which was a very large exhibition hall. He hadn't traveled more than 10 feet, and people were walking up and shaking his hand. He's a very well-known guy. But I'm now a good buddy with this guy, and I find LinkedIn is awesome for business creation. I knew about Wingstop, for example, looking at Canada months before anybody, and I was talking about trying to get the account, but at least I knew about it. I find that being able to promote your profile on LinkedIn is very important. And then last year, I was recognized by the CREI guys. I was number 86 on the LinkedIn social numbers. And then this year, I reversed those numbers. I became 68. And I didn't get to go to the convention last year in Lake Tahoe because of COVID regulations in Canada. We couldn't travel, but I'm heading down to New Orleans in September. I'm looking forward to meeting these people. And, they just came out this last week with the Twitter top 150 and the TikTok top 150. And I know nothing about Twitter and TikTok. I just don't get it. But apparently, people are doing a lot of business on this. So I'm looking forward to finding out what's this all about. I have a niece that works in the fashion end of things. She was a buyer with Amazon, and she left Amazon. She worked with TikTok for about a year when TikTok was looking to expand their fashion realm. And when you saw how fashion embraced TikTok, you had all these small independent fashion people that were promoting their lines. And they'd make a nice cut of fabric or a nice wardrobe, and they'd instantly promote it. So what this has given, we're living in a time when everyone's got a television studio on their desk. And I sometimes joke that younger people don't know how to talk on the phone anymore, and they just do everything by texting, and they're not willing to make a phone call. And I sometimes rib some of our younger sales reps about that. But when I was at university, I'll tell you this, Raphael. When I was at university, the most important thing I did was I got involved as a DJ on campus radio. So I was on campus radio from 1982 to 1985. Best years of music, by the way. But what it taught me was how to talk in public. I don't stammer. I know how to present myself. I know how to have a thought come from in here and go out of here. And your generation now is all about electronics. It's all about visualization and retrieve. You can retrieve information in a millisecond. But what do you do with that information? Do you just kind of look at it and then throw it away? Or how do you retrieve it? How do you think about it? How do you use it? How do you use that to create other relationships? And I think it's really important for younger people to look at how do you increase your field of influence through friends, acquaintance, business relationships. You can't just. I went to a meeting once where a guy was talking about what it was like 100 years ago, 200 years ago. I'm Scottish, okay, and the whole idea of Scottish brogue and accents was because people were born, lived, and died within 20 miles. Okay, that's the reason they have accents. Now, my young cousins are now all on LinkedIn. They're all on, Twitter. They're on Netflix. They're losing their accents because they now go on ski vacations in Germany. They go to Mallorca. They go to North Africa. These are now people of the world. When I used to work in Scotland in 1985, it was the most isolated, miserable place ever. It was during the coal miners' strike, and it was just awful. Now it's beautiful. I have cousins that live in Glasgow, work in London, and they're very mobile. And that was just a generation. They, in a single generation, they now are, looking at news from all around the world because of the internet. They now travel all around the world. And, I look at what's going to happen in the next 20 years. It's just amazing. And like, I try and use social media as much as I can in my business, but I just enjoy it. I enjoy the interaction. I enjoy the transference of knowledge. I enjoy networking with people. I'm not making a ton of money off of it, but I certainly have a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you're adding value. And you're adding value too, like you said. You're condensing these ideas from avenues that you find helpful, and now can impart that to other people. And I think with the growing number of people that are utilizing these platforms, I mean, it's creating a thought leadership platform. Essentially, you're allowing yourself to be able to impart wisdom on people from a variety of different areas around the world. And again, another thing that I want to expound on that you said something that I think is extremely important is the communication piece when it comes to any type of business, but in particular when you're talking about sales and real estate. I joined Toastmasters in 2016, and I've been part of the organization ever since. And that's a public speaking organization that's around the world, and that's helped me immensely in my confidence in speaking in front of people, and being able to communicate effectively in regardless of the settings. And so that's one of the things that I think that I always encourage people to do. It's usually a free organization. You just pay a small amount of money each year to kind of keep the club going. But really, that's been the most helpful thing for me when it's come to trying to refine my communication skills in a public setting. So couldn't agree more.
Well, I did all the Tony Robbins. I did all those courses over the last few decades, and they're very interesting.
Absolutely. No. So again, Don, we're getting close to the final ticker of the podcast. But first off, we just greatly appreciate your time and sharing your insights with the group. As someone who is getting their footing in the retail space, I gain a lot of value from our conversation. So I really do appreciate your time. One thing we typically ask near the end of the podcast is we like to learn a little bit more about the most impactful book that you've ever read. We're all pretty voracious readers. Like we had talked about earlier, I love Audible, and I try to read at least 10 pages of a book. It's kind of part of my morning routine, along with just at the gym, listening to audiobooks, etc. So I'm always looking for great recommendations. I don't know if you have one in particular that kind of changed the way that you view the world. And it doesn't necessarily have to be real estate related. We've had people provide a variety of different ones.
As I said, I'm not a voracious reader, but I'll tell you what one of my favorite books is Shop Girl by Steve Martin.
Okay.
Now, Steve Martin, the comedian, he's a genius. He's brilliant. But he wrote a short novel. It's only about 100 pages. And it's called Shop Girl. And it's about him going into a retail store. And there's this beautiful woman selling gloves behind the counter. And over the course of a week, he falls in love with her. And it's just, it is one of my favorite novels. I read it all the time. Now, another novel that I read it's actually from a series of short stories called Man in His World, and this is the story is called The Machine Stops, and it was written about 110 years ago, and it is a British novel, and it's about a future society where everything is brought to people. There's it's very much an analogy to Amazon as we live today. There's the internet. There's this story, The Machine Stops, was written and actually predated the internet, video conferencing, Twitter, social media, and if you have a chance to read that, you can get it online. I think it's free domain right now. You can just pick it up and read it. It is just amazing. So those are two little fun stories. You could read them over the course of a weekend.
That's awesome. Great recommendations. I've never actually heard either of those books, so I'm excited to dive in, especially the one about Steve Martin. I actually watched a little documentary on him recently. He is just a impressive individual, really.
Yeah. It's try and read Shop Girl if you can. So it's a fun weekend read.
Oh, absolutely. No, I appreciate that share. So again, Don, we greatly appreciate your time on the podcast. One of the things we like to ask at the end is, we have something called the Commercial Real Estate Treasure Chest. It's a repository of resources that we make available to our audience. And, typically our guests contribute something like a helpful PDF, Excel sheet. We've had people contribute ebooks, really anything that they feel would be of value to the audience. So if you don't mind, I wanted to give you an opportunity to share what you're willing to contribute today.
Well, I'm going to have to give that some thought. I use an awful lot of Excel spreadsheets, but they're all proprietary, so I can't really hand those.
No. Or maybe some of the, if you have reserves of some of the articles that you've shared in the past, maybe some of those posts, that would be helpful, because I know, I would love to read some of those.
Yeah, I probably have the last 8 to 10 years of Amazon posts, like everything to do with Amazon that I have collected. I could happily submit something like that, all the Amazon posts from the last 10 years, which makes some interesting reading.
Absolutely. That would be phenomenal if you could share that. I know I would read it. I'll tell you right now, I'd absolutely read it. So if you're willing to do that, I would love to.
Thousands and thousands of articles on PDF that I've saved to a central retrieve. So I will give you my Amazon selection, going from probably last week back to about 8 or 9 years ago. Okay.
Absolutely. We would greatly appreciate that. And again, we do appreciate your contribution to the treasure chest. So if people wanted to learn more about you, obviously that's another thing we usually ask at the end is people want to learn more about you, get in contact with you, or maybe they're in the Toronto market or looking to break into the Toronto market on the retail side. What's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, and I will respond usually within the hour if you DM me on LinkedIn. And you can get a hold of me on our corporate website, which is Aurora Realty Consultants, and email me there. But I'm happy to talk to people if people are interested in the business. Just give me a shout.
Absolutely. No. And we'll include all that information in the description below. So if you guys are watching this on YouTube, it'll be in the description. If you guys are listening to this in a podcast format, like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever, it'll be in the description as well. So again, go ahead.
Do a link to those 2 books as well, Raphael. Okay.
Oh yes. And we usually include the links below as well. So, our virtual assistant helps out with that. She kind of identifies the books and then includes them in the links below. And that's, I've gone back through videos in the past and just clicked in the links and bought the books, and it's very helpful. So we try to make it as easy as possible for our audience to listen to the books that they want to listen to. So again, thanks again, Don, so much for your time. We do greatly appreciate it. Also, thank you all for tuning in to the podcast. We also greatly appreciate it. If you guys don't mind, please go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. We've seen a significant uptick in our downloads as a result of you guys doing so. If you guys are watching this in YouTube, please like and subscribe to this channel. It really helps the YouTube algorithm, ensures more and more people can hear this message and learn about the many facets of commercial real estate. So thank you all so much for stopping by, and we'll see you all next time.